The assassins had planned for everything: the route, the police response, the ambassador's security detail. They had maps, weapons, and a clear line of fire. The one thing they didn't account for was the old man selling hot dogs on the corner. To them, he was nothing, a piece of the scenery. They never imagined that behind his friendly smile was the mind of a Secret Service legend, a man who had forgotten more about protecting dignitaries than they would ever know. This was a fatal oversight. Welcome to the unspoken chapter. Before we uncover the tactical mind hidden behind the friendly smile, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. And if you believe that heroes are not defined by their uniforms, but by their actions, hit that subscribe button and help us honor the guardians who hide in plain sight. For Frank Pops Miller, life smelled of mustard and onions. For 30 years, he was at the same corner where Grand Avenue and 12th Street intersected. His stainless steel hot dog cart gleamed like a diamond on sunny days, and stood as a warm beacon in the city's gray on rainy ones. Frank was in his 70s. His arms were strong, and his smile was always ready. He wasn't just a vendor. He was a living monument of this corner, a part of the daily lives of lawyers, bike couriers, construction workers, and tourists. He knew everyone's order by heart, could predict the weather from the ache in his bones, and always had a listening ear. His small world was built on order and repetition. He'd arrive at 10 in the morning, set up his cart, serve the lunch crowd, and clean up in the afternoon as the city's rhythm slowed. This corner was his observation post. He knew every crack in the sidewalk, every stain on the marble steps of the bank across the street, and when the traffic lights were likely to malfunction. He was an invisible part of this small ecosystem, a reliable pillar standing in the same place every day. That day had started like any other. It was a sunny afternoon, and business was slow. As Frank polished the metal surface of his cart, he noticed the convoy of black vehicles approaching from down the street. It was a common sight in the city: tinted windows, small antennas on the roofs, and a palpable field of tension around the vehicles. Diplomats, politicians, or other important people. For Frank, it just meant the traffic would be a bit heavier for a few minutes. Inside the armored limousine in the middle of the convoy, a young but experienced Secret Service agent, David Harris, kept his eyes on the rooftops of the surrounding buildings. He was in constant communication with his team, visuals clear, approaching the intersection. Everything seemed routine, but Harris, by profession, never trusted routine. Danger always came from the most unexpected place, at the most ordinary-looking moment. His eyes fell on the hot dog cart and the old vendor on the corner, part of the scenery, harmless. The moment the convoy reached the middle of the intersection, all hell broke loose. It all happened in less than a second. The tires of a van parked ahead of the intersection exploded with a deafening bang, and the vehicle swerved across the road. Simultaneously, 2 cars positioned at either end of the street blocked the convoy's escape routes. A kill box had been established. Before the agents could even process what was happening, automatic gunfire erupted from the windows and roofs of the surrounding buildings. Bullets ricocheted off the armored bodies of the vehicles, creating spiderweb cracks on the bulletproof glass. Harris's team responded instantly. Doors opened, and agents in black suits tried to form a defensive line around the limousine, firing their weapons. But the ambush was flawless. The attackers had every angle covered. As Harris took cover behind his car door, he shouted, "Ambush!" Rooftops! East and west rooftops! But his voice was lost in the chaos. His team was scattered and suppressed. They were losing. It was at that moment that Frank's 30-year routine came to an end. When the first gunshot rang out, he instinctively grabbed a customer waiting at his stand by the collar and shoved him towards the entrance of a nearby building. "Get down!" he yelled. But his voice wasn't the gentle voice of Pops. This voice was harsh and sharp, accustomed to giving orders. Before the customer could understand what was happening, Frank tipped his 200-kilo steel cart over with a massive heave. With its sizzling grill and rolling hot dog containers, The cart formed a perfect barricade on the sidewalk. Agent Harris witnessed this strange sight in the midst of the firefight. The hot dog guy. But what happened next made Harris question everything he had ever seen in his professional life. The old man shouted from behind his barricade. His voice was clear, even over the sound of gunfire. "Not the roofs! The windows, second and third floors, the ones with the shutters. They have better firing angles from there." Harris froze. That information, that tactical analysis, it couldn't come from a civilian. Frank continued, as if directing his own team over an invisible radio. "Don't move the limo! The engine block is your best cover. Your right flank is exposed. Echo 3, pull back to the marble pillars of the bank. That marble will stop a 7.62-inch. The panicked chatter in Harris's earpiece stopped for a moment. The other agents had heard that voice too. This wasn't a civilian's advice. It was a command. The agent called Echo 3, without hesitation, moved as Frank had directed, to the bank's pillars, escaping a hail of bullets. Frank knew the corner he had watched every day for 30 years like the back of his hand. The West Side attackers have no escape route. The construction barriers are blocking the street. Pin them down there. The manhole cover to the north is your weakest point. Lay down suppressive fire there. You'll create a corridor for the limo. For the first time in his life, Harris was taking orders from someone he wasn't commanded by. And he was obeying them. Because the orders were flawless. The old man was seeing things they couldn't see. He wasn't just looking at a street corner. He was looking at a battlefield map. Harris shouted into his radio, "Everyone, listen up! The hot dog vendor is in command. Do what he says." It was the most absurd and the most correct sentence a Secret Service agent could ever utter in his career. Thanks to Frank's tactics, the tide of the battle turned. The agents took more effective positions under his direction. The attackers met an unexpected resistance. Their perfect plan was being dismantled by the one variable they hadn't accounted for, an old vendor on the corner. As a final move, Frank slightly loosened the valve on his propane tank and tossed it away with a pair of tongs. The tank began to spin and hiss in the middle of the street. It was enough to distract the attackers. "Now!" Frank shouted. "Get the limo out!" Southbound, now. Harris and his team did not miss this opportunity. The limo managed to escape the trap with screeching tires. The attackers, having lost their target, and with police sirens approaching, vanished into the smoke. 10 minutes later, the street was filled with police, the FBI, and more Secret Service agents. The asphalt was covered with casings and broken glass. In the midst of this chaos, Agent Harris walked towards the old man, who was trying to right his hot dog cart. Frank was picking up scattered onions and napkins, as if he wasn't the man who had just saved a dozen lives. Harris stood in front of the man. He didn't know what to say. He began. "I don't know how to thank you." Frank replied, without even looking at him. "Just a bit of a mess," he said. "Needs to be cleaned up." Harris ignored the evasive answer. "Who are you?" he asked. "Those tactics, the terminology you used, where do you know that from?" Frank straightened up and looked Harris in the eye for the first time. In his eyes, there was no friendly Pops, who had stood at his stand for 30 years. There was something much older, much more dangerous. "I'm just a guy who sells hot dogs, son," he said. "Always have been." That night, at the Secret Service Command Center, Agent Harris was reviewing all the records of the incident. The room was buzzing with analysts and supervisors, all asking the same questions. Who were the attackers, and how did a simple ambush fail so spectacularly? Harris stayed silent, knowing he was the only one who had a piece of the real answer. The key wasn't in the attackers' identities, but in the old man who sold hot dogs. Something had caught his attention. A specific command Frank had shouted, "This is checkmate," wasn't just an old protocol. It was a ghost protocol, a phrase Harris vaguely remembered a grizzled instructor at the academy mentioning once, calling it a ghost's whisper, a code used by deep-cover agents who were completely off the books. Exceeding his authority and using the terminal of a senior director, Harris delved into the oldest, dustiest corners of the digital archives. He navigated a clunky, text-based interface that hadn't been used in decades, searching for any mention of the protocol or the observation post at Grand and 12th. Finally, he found it. A heavily redacted file, almost entirely blacked out. The agent's name was gone, but his commendations were listed as code numbers. Harris recognized one. A citation for the Berlin Wall Incident, 1989, a legendary, almost mythical event in the service. The agent's specialization was listed as Urban Environment Counter-Surveillance and Tactical Response. Then Harris saw the final chilling entry. Status, Echo 0. Asset presumed burned. No recovery. Echo 0 was a designation Harris had never even seen before, a code that implied a level of disavowal beyond that of a mere ghost. It meant that not only did the agent no longer exist, but the service would deny he ever had. The photo in the file was of a man in his 40s, with a stern, tired face. The eyes were the same. Harris felt a shiver run down his spine. He wasn't just dealing with a retired agent. He was dealing with a living legend the agency itself had tried to erase. The next day, Harris returned to the corner without his uniform, in civilian clothes. He felt a strange nervousness, the kind a rookie feels approaching a seasoned veteran. He wasn't an investigator today. He was a pilgrim. Frank's cart was there as usual. Frank was smiling and giving change to a customer, as if yesterday had never happened. Harris got in line and ordered a hot dog. Frank seemed to recognize him but didn't let on. He prepared the hot dog with the same meticulous, economical motions he had used during the firefight. Every movement with purpose, nothing wasted. Harris saw the battlefield commander in the way the man spread the mustard. He took the hot dog and paid. As Frank gave him his change, Harris said in a low voice, "Thank you for your service, sir." Frank paused for a moment. His eyes once again took on that old, dangerous expression. For a split second, the friendly Pops was gone, replaced by the man from the file, the ghost of Berlin. A flicker of acknowledgement, a slight tightening of his jaw, confirmed everything Harris suspected. Then, just as quickly, he broke the tension, deliberately turning back to his grill. He gave a slight nod. Not a single word was spoken. But in that moment, everything that was unsaid was understood between the two men. Agent Harris turned and began to walk away. He didn't just disappear into the crowd. A block away, he stopped and looked back. He saw Frank laughing with a regular customer, a construction worker, slapping him playfully on the back. The legend, the ghost, the tactical genius was gone. Only Pops remained. It was then that Harris truly understood. The hot dog stand wasn't a prison or a hiding place. It was a choice. It was a sanctuary this man had built for himself after a life in the shadows. Service didn't always end with a pension and a folded flag. Sometimes it ended on a quiet street corner, with the freedom to offer a simple, friendly smile. For him, life went on where it had left off. He was a silent guardian, a nameless hero whose existence no one knew of. And that was enough for him. Now we ask you, have you ever witnessed an ordinary person do something extraordinary? Share the stories of the everyday heroes you've met in the comments below. We believe their unspoken chapters deserve to be read. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the Unspoken chapter and help us ensure these legends are never forgotten. We'll see you in the next story.